Hello, everyone. Today I'm going to do something a bit different. I'm going to do a top five of my favorite bad 1950s science fiction movies. And these are, some of them are so bad they're good, and some of them are so bad they're just bad. But I enjoy them. I'm not going to do Plan 9 from Outer Space. That's been done to death, or Bride of the Atom. Ed Wood has kind of been done to death over the years. These are some more obscure movies. You may have heard of them, and you may never have heard of them. They're so obscure, but like I said, they're so good they're bad. I guarantee that if anything else, you'll enjoy them. At least some of them. Some of them you may not. They're so bad, but I do enjoy them. These are not in any particular order. Number one is Robot Monster by Phil Tucker from 1953. It was released in 3D. I've never seen it in 3D, but it was, and it's just horrendously bad. It was written by a guy named Wyatt, and it's Wyott. It's an odd spelling, Ordung, and stars George Nader, Jeffrey Moffat, Claudia Barrett, and George Barrows. It's about a ostensible robot who's actually a man in a gorilla suit with a diving helmet. Apparently, Tucker wanted to build a robot suit. He didn't have the money. He only had like $16,000 to make this film, $18,000, I think. But a friend of his said, "Hey, I got a gorilla suit. Why don't we do that?" And he said, "Okay, well, what do we do for the robot part?" He said, "Well, I got a diving helmet, and we put some antennas on it, and he looks like a robot. And he wears a stocking over his head. It's pretty funny. He does come across convincingly as a robot. He's technically called Roman Extension XJ2, who is here on Earth, which has been destroyed by the Roman, pretty much, except for 8 people who are left. 2 are astronauts who we hear about but never see, and they're going up to a space station. And the leader of the Roman, who is referred to as the Great Guidance, destroys that spaceship. So now there are only 5. There's this family of people. A family plus a scientist who's sort of just the romantic interest for the daughter, played by Claudia Barrett. Um, there's some great things in it. There's the quote unquote calcinator death ray is actually a billion bubble machine that sits inside a cave. Great Guidance, for some reason, is like the Roman, but his helmet's darker, and for some reason, when he speaks, he waves a glass violin bow around to emphasize what he's saying, which is just strange. It's just a bizarre element. It doesn't really have anything to do with the story. He just has this glass violin bow. Uh, some great quotes in there, like Roman's soliloquy. He's supposed to destroy all these last 5 Earth people, so the Roman can take over the Earth. And he has problems because he starts to fall in love with the daughter. And he has this, what's called Roman's soliloquy, which is, "I must, but I cannot. But I cannot, but I must. Oh, where on the graph do must and cannot meet? I must, but I cannot. But I cannot, but I must." That's just typical. One of the children, Johnny, is immune to this Roman's calcinator death ray because of some serum that his father, the professor, has given him. So when Roman sets off his calcinator death ray, it doesn't do anything. He says to Roman, and this is a great line, "You look like a pooped out pinwheel." I think that's terrific. Just some great lines like that. "If you want us, you have to calculate us." And when the professor's daughter is killed, he says, well, we enjoyed her while she was here. Now we just have to learn to live without her." Like, oh, well, so what? My daughter's dead. It's just really bad writing, really bad acting. Really, really funny movie. And of course, it has the typical ending of this type of movie. Kid wakes up, he's actually in a cave, he hit his head, and the whole thing was a dream. Or was it? Because just as he's going off to be back with his family again, everybody's alive, nobody got killed, we see Roman coming back out of the cave towards us, obviously in 3D, and he's real. So it's kind of a scary, supposed to be scary, it's really not, ending. I highly recommend it. It's very funny, very stupid science fiction movie. Number 2, possibly even worse, and I know that's hard to say, The Brain from Planet Arros from 1957 from Howco Pictures, in a an Elvira episode, she reviewed this movie. She said that how it was Howko, like how come this is such a bad movie. I think that's appropriate. It was directed by Nathan Duran, written by a guy named Ray Buffum. Stars John Agar, who is wonderful at overacting, and Joyce Meadows, who people may know from The Honeymooners, but she was much younger and prettier in this one. Robert Fuller, and it revolves around these two guys, scientists, find a cave that's kind of radioactive, and they're not sure what's going on inside. And as they enter, they're met and attacked by this giant brain, just basically just a disembodied, not totally material brain named Gore, from the planet Arros, and he's a criminal, and he, I think, burns one of the guys to death with radiation, and the other guy it shrinks down and inhabits his head. And so now he's inside John Agar's mind, controlling him. He calls a meeting of world scientists and demonstrates his power by blowing up an atomic test range with an even more powerful weapon. And says, if you don't cooperate with me, I'll destroy your whole planet. To prove it, he knocks a plane out of the sky, and the victims all appear to be burned with radiation. And so they start realizing, okay, we're going to have to deal with this character somehow. Meanwhile, another brain from planet Arros, but who's good, named Vol, appears in the same cave, and he inhabits the body of Joyce Meadows' dog, because the dog follows John Agar around everywhere, so they figure that way he can keep an eye on Gore by inhabiting the body of the dog George. So that happens, and there's some kind of funny circumstances there. Eventually, Vol reveals that Gore does have a weak spot. That is, every few hours he has to recharge and go back into his his corporeal form. And when he does that, he's vulnerable if he was attacked in a portion of the brain called the Fissure of Rolando. And eventually, the heroes manage to destroy Gore, and Vol comes back out of George and says thank you, and I'm off, and nobody believes him at the end. Joyce Meadows is telling them that it was in the dog, and they say, oh yeah, sure he was. There's some great lines, including my favorite in the whole movie when Gore is inhabiting John Agar. He says about Joyce Meadows, and I'll try to do it in the voice that he uses. She gives me a very strange and very new elation. And that's the way he says it. It's really funny. He also says to him, your feelings of helplessness are your best friend, savage. And that's quoted a lot. And me in your stupid body. Stupid. Stupid. Ha 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 ha. And I love that. Just great over-the-top acting. John Agar was actually a very good actor. If you want to see him in a film where he plays a much more serious role, but is still, is good, watch him in Bait with the gorgeous Cleo Moore, directed by Hugo Haas, and also starring Hugo Haas, and also written by Hugo Haas. He's really good in that. He underplays in that. He doesn't chew the scenery the way he does in The Brain from Planet Arros. Again, a great, awful but funny movie. The third one is unusual because it's actually a parody. It's not meant to be taken seriously, but it's still really bad. It's called Invasion of the Star Creatures from 1962, directed by Bruno V. Soto, who was actually a professional wrestler, and written by Jonathan Hayes. It stars Dolores Reed and Gloria Victor, and two comedians, Robert Ball and Frankie Ray. And they are two dopey privates who work on this place, Fort Nicholson. That's a joke because the name of the company, American International Pictures, was run by a guy named Nicholson. So that's a joke on him. And they're summoned by their goofy commander, a guy called Colonel Rank, played by Mark Ferris. And he says there was an explosion and it emptied out this cave. And they want to find out, what's in the cave, what's going on with this cave. And so they're sent along with a troop of, more competent soldiers, including Sergeant Glory, who talks in kind of 50s hipster talk. Hey, man, like, wow, it's that kind of stuff. And they are become separated from the rest of them, and they're attacked by these huge quote unquote veggie men who look like overgrown carrots and knocked out, and they wake up in a inside a spaceship and are greeted by two gorgeous women from the planet Kalar in the Belfar star system, 600 million light years from Earth. And their names are, I kid you not, Dr. Puna, who is Dolores Reed, and Professor Tanga, played by Gloria Victor. Now, I don't know how they got away with that even in 1957. Maybe they weren't familiar with that term, but pretty funny. They're here to take over the Earth, obviously, and they're going to use these veggie men to help them. And they grow them in pots, which is hilarious. You see, like this hand coming out of a pot growing. They have a disintegrator ray that they can use on them if they disobey. And a lot of funny things happen. One of the privates kisses, I think, Gloria Reed and Gloria Victor, and she becomes frozen. And he realizes, that they have a weapon against them. They have a thing that reads minds, and they try to read Private Philbrick's mind, and it's blank. They try to read Private Penn's, and he has this big, stupid, fantasy about being in this, being a great hero and beating up bad guys. And there's some great lines. And one of them, at one point, they ask, I think it's Philbrick, and said, "Are women all you think about?" And he says, "No." And they say, "Well, what else?" Says, "Girls." That's great. And he also, Philbrick gets thrown around by one of these veggie men. They're trying to demonstrate how strong they are. And they break a table in half and they throw him across the room. He says, "That's the first time a salad ever tossed me." And just some great stuff. Bad, goofy. There's some, unfortunately, somewhat racist portrayal of American Indians, but if you can put that aside and, again, realize this is a parody, it's not meant to be taken seriously. They do some funny stuff like running around in a cave that's supposed to be different level. It's obviously the same level, back and forth, and, making fun of bad science fiction movies in this. At least there wasn't a giant spider, but they're like paper mache rocks, which are obviously paper mache, and they're throwing them down at these veggie men, and they just knock them aside like they're nothing. And, it's just really funny. Of course, in the end, they accidentally destroy the alien spaceship that they're going to use to bring their, fellow Kalarians here to Earth to conquer us by Philbrick accidentally sits on the button and blows the ship up. And, Penn says, "Wow, you really used your head." Funny stuff. And then since they're stuck on Earth now, Professor Puna and Dr. Tanga decide to marry the two Earthmen. And in the end, you see them driving off together in a big Cadillac, I think. After the men are given medals for defeating this invasion. Really funny. I highly recommend it. Silly, goofy, very bad, bad dialogue, bad writing, but very amusing. Dolores Reed, by the way, is also in a Hugo Haas movie. For a few moments, she's in Hit and Run, which is the last movie he did with Cleo Moore before she retired from acting. She has only a brief role as a lion tamer / dominatrix, which is rather a good role. It's brief, but it's memorable. Dolores Reed was gorgeous. Unfortunately, she died of a heroin overdose. The fourth film is Catwoman of the Moon from 1953. This again was in 3D, again from Astor Pictures, directed by Arthur Hilton, written by Roy Hamilton, starring Sonny Tufts, who usually played a bad guy in movies, Victor Jury, Marie Windsor, and the soundtrack was by Elmer Bernstein, who also did the soundtrack for Robot Monster. So not only were they the same production company, but the same composer. It's a story of men who land on the moon. They find a hidden cavern, which is oddly decorated, kind of like an Egyptian temple. And there are these quote-unquote cat women who dress in black leotards, and they're all, look like they came from a beauty contest. They wear heavy makeup, and they got high heels. And, in alien culture, they just happen to look a lot like, beauty queens from Earth, which a couple of them were. They're controlled by a woman named Alpha. It's played by Carol Brewster. And she says things like, "We will get their women under our control, and soon we will rule the whole world." There's another girl who's kind of jealous of her called Beta, played by Suzanne Alexander. And one of the people says about her, "You're too smart for me, baby. I like 'em stupid." That's a great line. A terrible, but a great line. And then there's Lambda, who's played by Susan Morrow, who falls in love with one of the astronauts. She says, "I love you, Doug, and I must kill you." Again, great goofy writing. There's giant spiders, of course. There's diamonds on the moon, apparently, and one of the astronauts wants to go after him. They steal their spacesuits so they can't get away. And one of the women, I think it was Lambda, because she fell in love with the astronaut, tells him, "I'll get you your spacesuits, but you got to take me with you." Well, unfortunately, she's killed by, I think it's Beta. And so the only survivors are a couple of the astronauts. I think one of the astronauts is killed, but the one who was going after the diamonds, and he gets eaten by the big spider. But the rest of them escape back to Earth. Goofy, funny, silly. There's a cool dance that they do, kind of like an Egyptian dance uh, on the moon, which makes very little sense. The idea of a civilization on the moon that was running out of oxygen, that's kind of interesting. That's actually a fairly interesting science fiction idea that's not total rubbish. It's worth watching. And the fifth one, again, these are in no particular order. I just rewatched this last night. It's called The Astounding She-Monster from 1958. Directed by and produced by Ronnie Ashcroft, written by Frank Hall, released again by American International Pictures. It stars Shirley Kirkpatrick as this kind of strange, mysterious, gorgeous alien, and Gene Tatum as a gun moll, Marilyn Harvey as a woman named Margaret Chaffee, who's a socialite who gets kidnapped by Ken Duncan and Ewing Brown, and then Robert Clark as a geologist. The story is about a meteorite that lands somewhere near in the woods out the San Bernardino Mountains outside Los Angeles, and it lands near the cabin of this geologist. And a beautiful woman comes out. She doesn't speak at all. Doesn't say one line of dialogue in the entire film. That gives her a very strange and alien atmosphere. Plus, they give her these big, huge, arched eyebrows that like go up, like this, which makes her look very sinister. She's of course wearing a form-fitting bodysuit and silver high heels. She does some strange things, like she walks backwards, and I found out there's a very funny reason for why she walked backward. Shirley Kirkpatrick, on the first day of filming, I think they only had 7 or 8 days. On the first day of filming, she broke the butt out of the bodysuit by bending over to pick something up. They didn't even have enough money to repair it, so they said, "Oh, just walk backwards. That'll look weird and alien." Actually, it does. It's kind of spooky seeing her walk backwards. And they also filmed her in like blurry, like gauzy vision. They put gauze over the lens, I think, to make her look double, or like she has this sort of shield around her that's impenetrable. Bullets can't go through it. The subplot is like something out of a really bad film noir. These gunmen abduct this socialite, Margaret Chaffee, and they're going to hold her for ransom. And their car breaks down because one of the drivers sees the alien woman. He crashes off the road. He says, "I think I saw somebody look like a naked dame coming at me." And the guy says, "Oh, you're crazy," And they take them up, and now they got to walk. So they end up at the cabin of the geologist, played by Robert Clark, and they hold him at gunpoint. And eventually the alien woman appears, and she shows up in the window, and they all freak out and like scream. And one of the gangsters goes out after her and shoots at her with his gun, and the bullets don't do anything, and she just touches him, and he's killed instantly by radiation. The other one is also exposed, but he hasn't died yet. But the geologist Robert Clark says, you've been poisoned, and we're going to have to take care of you, or you're going to die. I'm going to have to go into town. Well, they don't trust him, and they're going to send the gun mall to go with him and make sure he's not double crossing them, calling the sheriff or whatever. Things kind of go wrong, and eventually both because of this alien woman and because their plot is stupid, and the kidnapping plot isn't going to work out. And he does actually call the sheriff, I think, and I think he comes and kind of rescues the heiress, the socialite. But meanwhile, the she monster, as they call her, has killed another person. I think the other gangster, and she can just kill by touch, and she seems like she's invulnerable. Well, the geologist works out that there is a way to kill her, that he can concoct a acid that'll burn through the protective layer of her suit, and then she'll be vulnerable. And he concocts this acid. He just happens to be a chemist too, apparently, and he just happens to have these materials uh, in his cabin. And he concocts this acid and he throws it at her, and it destroys her suit, and she's also disintegrated. And they discover that she's wearing a medallion, and they open the medallion, and it's got a message in English that says, she was from the Master of the Council of Planets of the Galaxy, uh, and she was a peaceful emissary, and if she had done any harm, it was only in self-defense. Well, now they're kind of freaked out because they're sure they're going to send another emissary, but as the Robert Clark character says, is it going to be another peaceful emissary, or they're just going to come to avenge her death? So it leaves you on kind of a cliffhanger. Not a very good movie, but it's interesting and I enjoy it. And these are 5 movies that I like to watch over and over. I'm going to do some more later that are in color. These were for black and white. Okay, so have fun and enjoy the movies.